Now I got it.
There we are. Right. It is 6:03 on October the 15th. This is a regular meeting of the Common Council of the City of Oneonta. I'll call this session to order. And if you would please call the roll.
Mayor Drenick.
Here.
Councilmember Mosher Campoli. Here. Councilmember Walsh Russo. Here. Councilmember McHugh. Here. Councilmember Lepari Shu. Councilmember Carson.
Here.
Councilmember Harrington. Councilmember Matheson.
Here. All right, if you would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, folks. And we have a presentation. Our 2023 financial audit. Jonathan Gibbs is in the house on the TV. So we'll
They
move
just
to
need
the
a second to connect. Jonathan, if you can hear us, you're all set to start.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
Can.
gotcha.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me this evening, folks, especially over Zoom. My name is Jonathan Gibbs, and I'm a partner at BST. We are the independent audit firm that performs the city's annual audit. We have recently completed the city's December 31st, 2023 financial statement audit, federal single audit, as well as state DOT audit. I'm going to give a brief overview of each. Feel free to ask any questions you have along the way, or save them at the end. I can work with both, so feel free to interrupt as needed. We began our field work in June of this past year. We finalized the reports on September 26th and submitted them to the federal single audit house clearing site in order to comply with the deadline of September 30th. It's a bit later than we normally are. I think typically we issue early September, if not late August. Certainly, as some of you folks are aware, there were some vacancies as well as some turnover within the finance department of the city. However, due to the work and the help from Ginny in particular, we were able to meet that federal single audit deadline of September 30th. I want to go over each one of the reports that we issued. Again, we had a financial statement audit, which we'll talk about here first. BST issued an unmodified opinion over the city's financial statements. That is the highest level of assurance that we're able to provide in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. There were no new accounting standards implemented during the year. There were no significant changes in the accounting methodologies used by the city, so a rather standard year. Very often there are government accounting standards boards pronouncements that we have to incorporate, but that was not the case this year. Touching briefly on the financial results of the city, in total, the governmental funds of the city increased by about $1.4 million to a total fund balance of about $22 million at year end. In particular, the general fund increased about $335,000. Sales tax revenue increases in comparison to what the budget were, as well as some interest earnings and some, again, vacancies throughout the city that resulted in less expenditures on payroll and related benefits helped result in that. Briefly, the water fund increased about $833,000 in fund balance during the year as a result of the timber sales the city has had. And the sewer fund increased about $428,000 as a result of slow and steady increases in rate fees and some other factors. These increases were partially offset by a decrease in the capital projects fund of about $840,000. As you're all aware, there are some major projects ongoing throughout the city, and future anticipated long-term funding will offset those costs of the capital projects fund. As your auditor, we're required to briefly take a look at the overall health of the city's finances and consider a going concern of the city. We certainly have no concerns in that regard, and there's nothing to communicate to you folks in your position on the city council in terms of significant events that could happen in the future that would negatively impact the city. Overall, the financial statements, we found that all the estimates used by the city were reasonable. We had no issues or difficulties. We did not encounter any significant unusual transactions. We did not identify any fraud during the course of our audit. There were no audit adjustments that impacted the city. We only had a few immaterial past adjustments that did not require to be reported within the city's financial statements, given that the fact that they were immaterial. Moving ahead to the single audit of the city receives over $750,000 in federal funding, during the year, and accordingly, they are required to perform a single audit over the federal funds that were received. We had two major programs this year. The formula grants for rural areas, that's a Department of Transportation grant, as well as the ARPA funding that was provided to all municipalities from the United States Treasury. We had no findings here. No significant deficiencies, no material weaknesses, and we concluded that based on our testing, the city is compliant with all federal funding that it has received. Finally, we perform a state DOT audit. This is required in particular from the city's bus system and the Enterprise Transportation Fund. During the course of that audit, we also found no findings and that the city was compliant with New York State's rules, regulations, and requirements over that funding. Overall, we very much appreciate working for the city. Again, this is a little bit later than we normally do this, given some delays in terms of our audit test work based on those vacancies. But overall, we did not have any matters that we would have to formally verbalize and communicate to you folks in your roles as those charged with governance of the city. We issued the highest level of assurance that we are able to, and overall, again, a great, clean audit for the city. With that, I'm happy to take any questions that you folks have.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Do we have any questions from council for Jonathan? Jonathan, I have one. Can you speak kind of anecdotally about the health of the city's fund balance relative to some of the other municipalities that you wind up auditing over the course of the year?
Well, it's certainly a mix. We do everything from the smallest fire districts to significant counties such as Albany County and Fulton County. It can be a bit of apples to oranges there in comparison of fund balance. But again, we concluded that the city is financially strong, able to pay future expenditures that are going to be incurred, and that there were no considerations of going concern that we were required to incorporate both within our audit testing and no modifications of our audit opinion were required.
Well, we appreciate it. Doesn't appear that we have any additional questions. Do we have a question? No, that we have any additional questions. So, Jonathan, I just want to thank you very much on behalf of the city and wish you a good evening.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening.
All right. Nothing but good news there. We have now a couple of public hearings. The first public hearing is to receive comments on a proposed local law that would amend the provisions of Article 1, Section C-7 of the Oneonta City Charter entitled Ward Boundaries. And do we have anybody here who would want to speak to that? And seeing no response, we are going to close that public hearing and move on to public hearing to receive comments on a proposed local law that would amend the provisions of Article 2, Section C-9 of the Oneonta City Charter entitled Terms. Do we have anyone who would like to speak on that subject? And seeing no one, we'll close that. All right. And then we're going to move on then to petitioners. And I'll say as at the outset that the conversations that we've had these last several months now around a nominee of 7th Ward Council Member Carolyn Marks have all been heard. And I appreciate the input of the community in that regard. I've made my position clear. That's fairly inflexible. It's not fairly inflexible. It is inflexible. And so if there's a desire to speak on that topic, I'll simply say that you might be wasting both yours and the council's time. So I'd ask that you refrain. However, the petitioner section is open. If you would please identify yourself if you're inclined to speak and tell us where you live. And if you have something to say that you'd like to speak from the podium, please do. Otherwise, please just rise from your seat. Do we have anybody who would like to speak? Okay, do we have any correspondence? All right, moving on then, we'll move to our committee reports and starting with Councilmember Carson and the Legislative Committee. Welcome back.
Everybody had an opportunity to read the minutes. Any questions? As you read the minutes, you'll understand that motions 13, 14, and 15 on tonight's agenda are from the Fruit Souls labor. So,
Any questions or comments for Len? No? In that case, Len, thank you very much. And we'll move on to our Community Wellness Committee report. And Katie, would you like to take it away?
So we met recently, I don't have a date off the top of my head, it was 2 weeks ago. And Elaine was there and myself, and we had Dr. Georgeson joining us again, which was great. And we also had Toya from OFO. She runs the shelter there on, I don't know why I'm blanking, but Depew Street, right? Yep, on Depew Street. And we also had Jennifer Hill from Tobacco-Free Communities, Delaware, Otsego-Schoharie counties, join us. And so we've been talking about, or trying to understand better, I think, any gaps in services that might be existing in our community with regard to sheltering or supporting in other ways our homeless population. So we had, I think, a really enlightening and great conversation with Toya, and then we worked on the legislation a little bit for tobacco-free communities, and so I think both of those things will be returning to our next meeting. And so the intent, excuse me, is to work on the legislation until we're comfortable with it in community wellness, and then bring it to legislative committee. It'll be, you know, final forms are ready for review at that time. We can add additional thoughts there, and then it will come to council from there. So probably like December or January, there will be something on that. Am I missing anything?
No, I think there was a possibility, we're looking at food program and, you know, connecting up some more food resources for the city.
Oh, yes, that's
Yep.
right. We had a presentation. Yeah, I was really excited about that. And I did follow up on that. It was from Nakia Facey, who would like to do kind of an into the streets feeding program rather than something that's like static, similar to your Safe Haven, which has been serving our community in that way. And Saturday's Bread for like, you know, decades. He wants to try a different approach. So we were going to put him in contact with some people who might be able to help him move that goal forward. So.
So that's terrific. I know Nakia has reached out to me wondering what that next step would be.
Okay.
And so
His phone number.
that's wonderful.
Yep.
That's
I think
terrific.
we're all set.
So there was somebody, a gentleman named Michelle, I think, who's a junior in one of the colleges that made a presentation of maybe a month or so ago.
Is that
Did
the
he?
food locker?
Yes,
Yeah, I mean, I
Yes.
saw that idea.
That's right. And I don't think he was ever, I don't think he ever attended a meeting.
No.
So maybe we can kind of circle back with him and try to
That'd be
get
great.
him.
but I love the idea that we got a couple of community generated responses to food insecurity happening here. That's terrific.
Because our
Great.
local food resources are struggling, is what we're hearing.
Yeah, they truly are. Yeah. Any questions or comments? Yes.
Yeah, so actually just to relate it, I had a question about, in terms of the legislative work that you're working on, what, do you have a focus? Is it going to be around food, do you think? Or, I mean, do you have a sense of the kind of pieces of legislation that you'd be putting forward?
Yeah, that's about limiting tobacco retailers within the city. So we're looking at a permitting process and potentially some zoning, just distance requirements.
And I also just want to say thank you for bringing forward the topic of the unhoused homeless population in our city. I think it's really, really important. It's wonderful to have public conversations with people who are in the field. So,
Yeah, and it's
thank
been
you.
really enlightening. I mean, I think one of the, obviously we see that there is greater need than resources, or at least it's perceived that way. But I think that it's really important to mention that that's not for lack of trying. That's not for lack of effort with people who are in that space doing it every day. There are like, meetings on meetings in addition to, real strategies and funding opportunities and things that, people really are going after and seizing and sort of doing everything that they can. And we have, identified it always comes back to housing. So we, I think there's a stall kind of in the pipeline of getting folks to stable housing. That's just a lack of suitable units. So that was something that, just the more that we talk and we understand the work that is being done, and kind of frame, we may not be able to help directly, but it can help us, give us perspective on the decisions that we're making. So yeah, it was a really, really great. I thank you, Elaine, for setting that up to have Toya come. And then at our next meeting, we're gonna have Denise from MCAT come. That's the Mobile Crisis Assessment Team. And we have met with her before, with Chief Knapp and Chief Witzenberg. She's come before, and so it'll be good. I think just like you said, just kind of more awareness of what's going on behind the scenes and recognizing that, that there is work happening, and it's just a matter of being strategic and being kind of nimble and trying to figure out how we can help people who want help as best as we can.
And since that meeting, I had another meeting with the Safe Homes and Neighborhoods Task Force, and Jeff from Catholic Charities of Shenango County attended, and he's part of that SOS program, the Safe Options supports. And he shared that that program already in the early stages that they've, started working in Oneonta, they've already identified at least 75 individuals.
75.
75
That's much higher than
individuals.
last time.
They have been able to actually enroll 12. And this was as of last week, so these stats are always changing. And at that time, they had already been working on housing for 4 of them.
Cool.
And they said, all things considered for a program like that, that is a phenomenal start for something like that.
Cool.
So.
They're down there every day.
And he did also reiterate the same thing that Toya said, from Opportunity House, that it's the availability of affordable housing that is, making it difficult to move things along too.
And yes, Don, let me go with you.
Katie, do you know when the warming center is gonna open for the year? Because I think it's going below freezing in the next day or two.
Yeah, I feel like I did see something about that, but I wouldn't be able to tell you.
I think it was, because we talked about it at the meeting too, and I feel like it was November 3rd, but I would have to double check that. So it's happening soon.
So it's a couple of weeks away.
Yeah, but it is scheduled and they're set up.
Right.
And I see that they're accepting donations, so.
Len, you had a question?
Yeah, are we still including the county into the partnership?
Yeah, I'm still attending those human services meetings.
Great.
And they said that they really appreciate that. And they also said if there's specific questions that we want to bring ahead of time, I can contact and, have those questions brought so that they can come to the meeting prepared.
So you're kind of our liaison, you're giving that
I guess
information.
at
from-
least for now,
That's good.
Mhm.
so
That's good.
I'm happy to do that, it's, human services is an area I'm passionate about. I've always,
Yeah,
worked
and as a
in,
member of
so.
the Community Wellness Committee, it's a natural fit for you, sure,
Right, we need their partnership.
absolutely. Anything further? All right, in that case, Cecilia, we'll move to you, please, and the report on the Finance and Human Resources
Yes,
Committee.
I'm just looking for a tissue because as sort of like on schedule, I have a runny nose. It always happens when I sit in this seat. Okay, I'll just quickly go through. Yes, so we met on this past Thursday. The Finance and HR Committee had a full docket, and there's just a couple of items I wanted to draw the council's attention to. First, we had the quarterly review for the city in terms of employment. So if you get a chance, it's worth taking a look in terms of where we're at. And the second item, we wanted to just ask further about the Micro Enterprise Assistance Program grant in terms of what that provides, just to give us a little bit more context. And I just was going to ask Judy to speak a little bit about that in terms of how many applicants. That was the main question. So the number of applicants for each year, and I know you responded to my question, but just for the council's knowledge.
This year we received 4 applications, 1 is not eligible, they received a grant that was currently open from the county. So we can apply in the same round, for the same year, all that grants still open. So we have 3 that are gonna be reviewed by the committee. That means we're gonna have another rounds at some point soon. We have 2 years to get the project done, so plenty of time. That has happened in the past. 3 to 4 is typically a little lower than we want to get, but that's okay. That allows us to have the money longer, and available as other things come up. So, we're not worried about that at all. We will spend it all, in one way or another by the end of the grant. We don't give it back. Sure, it's out to the business.
That was your question, Ron. Wonderful. Okay, the last item that I wanted to just draw the council's attention to is in regards to the Quint that the city has been able to secure a loan for that purchase. And so I believe we have a motion on the consent agenda today that details further that purchase for that funding resolution. So I just wanted to draw everybody's attention to that. There's been an ongoing discussion about the Quint for a while now. So this is some kind of resolution.
So like, that's number 6 on the agenda. So
Yes.
that was part of my question. So as the loan of a little over $1 million, what was the length on that bond?
I'm sorry.
The length?
The length of the bond.
Correct. Just if it's in here, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah.
And where the interest rate is that 0% or?
So the loan will, this is authorizing the application for the loan. We're not actually entering into and taking out this loan at this time. That would happen potentially at the time of receiving or just before receiving the truck. If we decide to go with a loan, we still could decide, or maybe we apply for and receive grant funds and it reduces the amount we have to take a loan. Or based on the interest rate at that time, we might be able to bond or less. But this would lock in a certain amount that we would be eligible for. It's $1 million term.
1.9.
I'm not sure about the term. Is it 15 for that? I believe, correct.
I think the interest rate right now is 4%.
So since we're so many years away from coming to fruition on this, why do we have to enter into this agreement if it's not binding?
That's just Judy.
Yeah, so we applied for this funding round. And they need to lock it down in this funding round, and if we don't do that, there's no guarantee we get it again. So we're just trying to lock it down. It won't actually be, the loan itself won't be closed until we have the fire truck in hand and have the actual invoice to be able to submit. So, but in order to keep it in this, in order to get the money obligated, is their language, in this funding round, while it's available, we have to go through this process.
Okay, so even though it's not a grant, it's a loan, they want us to capitalize on the opportunity years in advance. And you said you were applying for other grants. Will this conflict with that? Or is this
This would
not,
be reduced if there's other grants that are.
because isn't the apparatus like 2 something, wasn't it?
Just over 2. Yeah.
A little over 2.
Yeah.
It was, when we applied, it was the 1.9, so that's the number that they've used, a little bit since then. But the 1.9 is coming out of this borrowing through, rural development, USDA rural development, and they do it in the form of bonding. Even though it's not one of our typical bonds, it's them. But yeah, the balance of it is coming out of our other funding.
Yeah, that would be determined at the time. Probably the public safety reserve would be the natural choice. Obviously, if we get additional grants, that would reduce the amount.
Right, that's a little over a million, isn't it? Something like that?
Currently, yes.
Yeah.
Ginny
So-
was looking into getting.
Right, she's been looking at other
She's
opportunities.
been trying to explore.
So, Judy, you mentioned it a couple times tonight, 1.9. I'm reading at the top of this, it says 1,095,000. Is there a difference? I'm not seeing.
I don't have it. What's your discrepancy?
It's,
She mentioned a couple of times,
Two.
1.9.
Yes.
And this is as 1,095,000.
Yeah.
Pretty different.
Okay. I have 1.9,
You know, it's just,
yeah,
yeah, but in the,
yeah, that's what I have.
okay.
Yeah, I think Ginny's really been working on this particular project, so she would be able probably to answer in more detail.
I just want, if we're going to go down this path and we need to get to 1.9, then we need to amend this.
905. Yeah, that's a good catch.
Yeah, it's just.
That was it, Fran.
Scott switched.
In the packet.
If you look in the packet, the actual form from rural development is in towards the back of that packet, that's 1905. I'm looking at the actual letter of conditions on my phone, that's 1905, this is just, I think it's kind of.
So this is just a typo, so we do need 1.9. Okay,
It is one,
so do you want to make a friendly amendment to it?
I can make friendly amendment when we get to that. Are there other questions?
Well, it's
And
part
we
of the
need to pull it,
consent
right?
agenda, so if we do it
Yeah.
now, it'll be part of the consent agenda, so we don't have to pull it out.
Well, we're not, well, I guess are we moving to the consent agenda then?
We will as soon as we do the approval of the warrants, yes. So, we'll take
So
it at the top.
the question is whether or not I'm able to preempt.
You can make the friendly amendment prior
Okay,
to. Right.
okay, so then I'd like to make a friendly amendment to alter the amount to 1.905 000.
Yeah, so if not. Okay.
If there's no objection, you don't.
Move on.
have a- yeah.
All right, so anything further for,
That was
you're
my
all good,
question.
it's satisfied. So if that's all out of the Finance and HR Committee, no further questions, then we will move on then to the approval of warrants. Motion that the Common Council approves the warrants totaling $1,335,856.24. And that the same be placed on the Director of Finance's desk for payment as presented. Do I have a motion to approve? Elaine, followed by Don, and Dawn. Take the vote, please.
Councilmember Mosher Campbell.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh Russo.
Aye.
Councilmember McHugh.
Aye.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Matheson.
Yes.
All right. And so we have multiple pages of the consent agenda, and this, in this particular case, has really worked out nicely. In terms of those who have typically read all this. And so do I have a motion to approve? Don, followed by Cecilia, and
Councilmember Mosher Campbell.
Yes.
Councilmember Walsh Russo.
Aye.
Councilmember McHugh.
Aye.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Matheson.
Yes.
right. Very good. Thank you very much. I think we're gonna bypass the city administrator's report this evening, are we not? Does anybody have any questions for Greg? You'll take those, I expect. Does anybody have any questions for Greg?
Yeah, did today's water main project go without a hitch?
I didn't hear of any issues, suspicions there.
Are we gonna be able to pave that bad boy before?
We're planning on paving by the end of October, I'm told.
Because
And so is that just a binder, Chris? I mean, we're not doing the top coat, right?
It's gonna be binder and top. Both Mark and Water Street and Chestnut.
Wow.
And we use a third party for the inspection.
You're all clear as well as Wendell.
Question?
yes, go ahead.
Structure question about the sidewalk replacements, like, ongoing. How's that? Perception, I guess.
Just words. Whatever
Okay,
we ever have money.
okay, cool. So it's ongoing.
I'm going.
Thanks.
Any further questions for Greg? Okay, if not, then thank you very much, Greg. And my remarks are simply, I want to just say thank you, Carrie, for everything that you did to facilitate the new audio system that we have. Can you hear us? What a nice change of pace, huh? So I'm so glad to finally be able to say that we are broadcasting and we can be counting on that being a regular occurrence. So just again, thank you very much, Terry, for everything you've done to bring this to fruition. That's all I've got, and we'll move on to our discussion agenda with motion number 12 that the Common Council authorizes the city administrator to sign a controlled substances supply agreement with A.O. Fox Memorial Hospital dated December 1, 2024 for the provision of controlled substances for use by qualified Oneonta Fire Department personnel administering advanced life support. This item subject to review by the city attorney. Do I have a motion to approve? Len, followed by Katie, and discussion? All right, so we'll take a vote on that.
Councilmember Mosher Campbell.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh Russo.
Aye.
Councilmember McHugh.
Aye.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Matheson.
Yes.
All right, then 13 being motion that the Common Council approves a local law modifying Chapter 300 of the City of Oneonta Municipal Code entitled zoning to establish a neighborhood markets overlay district. This local law was laid electronically on October 2nd, 2024. Do I have a motion to approve? All right, so Elaine followed by Katie, and discussion. No further discussion on this, and so we'll take that vote.
Councilmember Mosher Campbell. Councilmember Walsh Russo.
Aye.
Councilmember McHugh. Aye. Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Matheson.
Yes.
All right. Motion number 14, that the Common Council approves a local law which would amend the provisions of Article 1, Section C7 of the Oneonta City Charter entitled Ward Boundaries. This local law was laid electronically on September 24, 2024. Do I have a motion to approve? Don, followed by Elaine, and discussion on this topic?
I just said,
Yes.
this will go into effect following this November's election, is that right? No?
What's the date on this?
It goes to referendum next year. It does not take effect until 27.
Oh,
very
much.
yes, I remember now.
The ward boundaries?
No, the
Yeah.
ward boundaries.
Ward-
Ward boundaries change. It's the terms that will go into.
No, the ward boundaries as well,
I thought it was next year.
because it'll go with the next election.
Next general election.
Yeah.
Council.
The next
Next
general
election.
election.
Yep.
Next,
Session, David.
We're changing the wards. Then we're also changing the elections.
In 27 or?
It's gonna be the same. The year that the wards change is also going to be the year that the shortened term for the odd wards is going to go into effect. It does not apply to the even wards, they'll continue on the normal cycle,
so that would be November 2027.
whatever Carrie says. This case, Carrie is always right.
Yes, all cases. So I think the answer is November 2027. Okay. All right, further discussion? All right, second vote.
Councilmember Mosher Campbell.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh Russo.
Aye.
Councilmember McHugh. Aye. Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Matheson.
Yes.
All right, takes us to motion 15, that the Common Council approves a local law which would amend the provisions of Article 2, Section C9 of the Oneonta City Charter entitled Terms. This local law was laid electronically on September 24, 2024. And do I have a motion to approve? Len?
Question about this particular, I just saw an article that
Wait,
Do we want
Sorry.
we want to go into discussion after we've had that motion?
it's okay.
So do I have a second on the motion? Then we can go into discussion? Do I have a second?
No,
Katie,
oh, I made the
Some-
motion, I thought.
No,
No, I did.
Oh, okay.
then
second.
followed by Kate. Okay. Discussion?
I'm curious, so there was just reading that there is a New York State Supreme Court judge who has put a stay on this ruling that apparently is
Yes, it
not,
applies not to
doesn't
cities.
apply to cities?
Applies to villages. Only
Okay.
villages, that's the whole statutory thing was changed village law to make it consistent with the major election years. Has absolutely nothing to do with cities, does
Okay.
not apply to city only.
Okay, so that was my question. Okay, thank you.
Good question. Any other discussion on this?
So in other words, we can move forward with this
We can.
without any,
Yes, we can.
No judicial interference.
okay.
So if there is no further discussion, we'll take a vote.
Councilmember Mosher Campbell.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh Russo.
Aye.
Councilmember McHugh.
Hi.
Councilmember LaPartie.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Matheson.
Yes.
All right, now we get to the meat and potatoes.
So
Yes,
before we get to the meat and potatoes.
sure.
We'll go backwards and do some.
Do some appetizers.
Complicate. I would like to acknowledge that Max is in the gallery tonight.
Yeah.
Max is the young man that we're all putting our faith into for the skate park and the pump track. To show you how dedicated that he is, he actually drove 3.5 hours to make this meeting. I tried telling him that it was gonna be okay,
Mhm.
but you can see his concern. His concern, if that's how much faith we have in this young man, so I think that speaks a lot.
It
right there,
does.
That he drove 3.5 hours to be here.
It does, and I think Max, you and I are meeting this week, is that right?
Thursday, correct?
Yeah, that's right, so,
So,
yeah, and reinstituting the task force, correct?
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All good stuff.
So it passed through. You're good.
Yeah, you're good.
Go home now.
Locked it on.
But-
Did you know that
I'm sorry.
for you to get funds for this to start this?
Yes, I told him that you did that a couple
Thank
weeks
you.
ago.
Yes, yeah.
Wonderful. Sorry, now the 3.5 ended up being closer to 5 because of traffic.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, so stay a while. It's good to have you here. Thank you,
We're gonna
Lynn,
be
for bringing
talking
that
about
up.
the budget, so we're gonna say.
Yeah, that's right.
Sad.
Oh, it's all,
How
it's
it
all,
goes.
We'll keep suppressed for a little bit.
all right. So that was the chocolate cake. Do we have anything else that we want to do before we get to the meat and potatoes? Yes. Kate?
Quick drink of seltzer. So
Right.
Don, I want to answer your question. I went about finding out about the warming station. So the warming station officially opens November 1st, very close. But anytime code blue goes into effect anytime the weather drops below 32. So anyone presenting at the homeless shelter can be put up in a hotel anytime that it's under 32 degrees. If it's outside of those
Which is
times.
likely to be
Yeah,
Thursday.
because we're gonna have some cold weather.
Yeah. I think also even when the warming centers open, right, if they're full, they can still,
I
you know.
think so, right?
connect that, right?
Overflow.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. So thank you for the clarification and the question that spurred it. And we'll move on now to the draft budget presentation and discussion. Not much work. Little. Just a little. So
Budget discussion.
I don't believe that I can't think of a reason why we would. Before I let you go, is there any reason for us to think that there might be an executive session in this meeting? Does anybody have a rationale for an executive session? No. Okay, I think I can let you go. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Enjoy your time.
And we have Jenny on the big screen.
Right, aren't you finishing?
Just been working through it. Just been working through it.
Always. Lovely.
So Jenny, you're up. We see you. We see your name anyway.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I hope you don't mind if I keep my video off just because I'm not feeling very well.
Yeah.
And first I'm going to let Greg do the introduction, please.
Sure, thanks, Jenny. Yes, obviously, as everyone knows, we met in July, we met in August to talk initially about the 2025 budget. Per the charter, we're at the middle of October and we're presenting the draft budget. What we've done, we've asked department heads based on the council's directions to make their initial budget requests and try to keep their expenses about the same as last year, if at all possible. With the understanding that council wanted to look at two options, one being using the same amount of general fund unrestricted fund balance as we did last year, which was just over $1.8 million. And planning to increase to the tax cap, not above or below. And as far as the water and sewer fund, the other funds, those were essentially looked at as we have been the last few years with the 10% rate revenue increases as planned. In doing so, that the council also would like to look at another option, which includes zero use of unrestricted general fund balance. As we know, the general fund is the most difficult fund for the city. That's why we used 1.8 million out of fund balance last year. Tonight we have, and we shared this just last night, apologies for that. We'd like to get this out on Friday, but we just did not have the time. But what we shared so far is the initial requests from department heads and how those have been cut down to meet the option A, or draft A as I'm calling it, which is the use of 1.8 million from general fund balance. We'll go through what other revenue increases we're projecting in 2025 as compared to 2024, such as sales tax, cannabis tax, ambulance fees, those sorts of things. Then we'll go through some of the bigger items that were included in requests and taken out, equipment, some capital projects we're looking at, some positions that were proposed and then taken out to meet that draft budget. And then we can go through really in as much detail as you want, whether that's tonight or next month's meeting or the meeting after that. And really answer everyone's questions, make sure everyone's comfortable with what's included in there. And then as far as the draft B, if we want to call it that, looking at zero use of fund balance, we don't have something to present tonight. We've been working on a list of essentially a menu of options that, you know, if you did this, this is what you might say. If you did this, this is what you could say. We'd like to, you know, we could present that to council and have discussion about that. But I want to make sure we have this initial discussion first, get some initial feedback, and see if we really want to go to that next step, or how exactly we want to proceed to that step. Because some of those potential proposals, none of which I would recommend, you know, would result in reductions of staffing, reductions of services in the city, really decisions that I don't think are at the department head or the city administrator staff level. It's really about what services does the city provide. And I think that's something we want to make sure we have the right direction from the council before we start talking about those. So I guess without further ado, I'll hand it back to Ginny.
Let me just stop you real quick,
Mayor?
just so that everyone is clear. So this meeting will be followed by another meeting next Tuesday, same time, 6 p.m. On the 22nd, followed by another meeting the following Tuesday, 6 p.m. the 29th. All of those, you're right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all of those specific discussions to this budget. Just, you know, so that everybody has that in their calendar.
Yeah. So when do you expect to deliver to council draft B?
Based on tonight's discussion and feedback from council, we'll deliver whatever homework the council wants to assign between now and the end of the week. We would deliver that in advance of next week's.
I'm just curious of why that, when that was the parameters of what we were looking at doing tonight was
Well,
A and B.
One reason is we were running out of time.
Yeah.
So this it's been, I was working on this today with Jenny and other department heads. And I'd like to make sure that we're certain on some of these estimates and things that we're sharing with council, especially as I said, when we're talking about significant cuts to services. Things that staff should not be suggesting we should no longer provide this service. It should be the city of Oneonta saying, we're okay looking at changing this around and we want to see what those options are, I think. You know, this really is a difficult conversation. I just want to make sure that we're prepared for that. Let's have the initial conversation first, and then we're happy to go from there.
And there's also quite honestly a manpower issue around trying to generate all of this. I've been privy to the amount of work day in and day out, night in and night out that has been required to pull together what you have in front of you. So, you know, the reasonable expectations of the staff of two, one of whom is dealing with COVID. I still can't even believe you're doing that, Jenny. So I think that it's a reasonable expectation that we pursue the course that you've outlined. Further questions, or can we move on? Okay, let's move on.
Okay, yeah, Jenny, would you like to just kind of give a brief overview of the general fund?
Sure. Thank you, Greg. First, I want to just let everybody know what you have in your binders. The top part of your binder is summaries. that Greg had put together very detailed explanations on anything that changed by a 10% percentage mark. And that is a quick summary, a quick read of each account code within the general water, sewer, ET, and M funds. And then behind that is the detailed request by fund. And the detailed request will show you the request line from the department heads and then the draft A budget that Greg just mentioned. And I would just like to highlight in the general fund that between 2024 adopted and the draft A budget, the increase for the general fund is just over 1.1 million. What makes up over almost 78% of that is retirement costs went up through the New York State retirement system, an average of 17%. So that added more than 240,000 worth of expenditures just for the general fund. The health insurance, right now, we are looking at a 20% increase with Blue Cross and an 11% increase with our nonstop. So that averages to be about a 17.7%. Our health insurance broker is looking at different options for us to consider. I've asked him to look at our deductible going from 7,500 up to 9,200 and how that will affect the rates, but I do not have that information right now. So that health insurance increase is an average of what we know right now of the 17.7%. The 65 plus plan, we've been very fortunate for the past couple of years to not have any price increase on the 65 plus plan. But however, due to a change in federal regulations, the 65 plus plan is going up 48%. So the health insurance cost for just the general fund is going up over $269,000. The net wages in payroll wages themselves is going up just over $136,000. And one thing that we had to add to the 2025 budget is the interest on the BAN that we'll be issuing for Market Street. And that is an estimate. It's a high estimate of 4% of 240,000. So if it comes in at 2%, that will be 120 instead of 240. So right now that is just a aggregate estimate to have in the budget. So that's about 886,000 of the 1.1 million. Before draft A budget was considered, there was an additional over 728,000 of requests from the department heads. So to get down to the 1.8 million, we had to cut almost 729,000 worth of requests from the department heads. And as Greg said, the department heads kept their 0.4s to basically last year's level unless something was absolutely out of their control that would increase. Also, I wanted to tell you that our contract our long-term contract that we had gotten into a few years back for our electricity has expired and will be renewed for beginning in 2025. That price has gone up 50%. We were locked in at 0.051 for our kilowatt hours. That's now going up to over 0.07. So where that really affected the general fund budget was for our street lighting, but you will also see that in the water fund, it affects the electricity for both plants, the water and wastewater treatment plant, for the electricity needed to run the plants. So that is just a quick summary of the general fund expenditures. And Greg has provided you a summary of where we increased the revenues. We increased the revenues over 700,000 for the general fund, 400,000 of it being for sales tax, 100,000 for cannabis sales tax, 100,000 for ambulance revenues, 70,000 for code enforcement fees. And I'm sorry, Greg, I'm doing this part from memory. Can you help me out for the other categories?
So Ginny mentioned the sales tax. Did you mention cannabis tax?
Yes.
We had not budgeted that in 2024, even though we are receiving that now because we don't have any history. So now we're budgeting 100,000. Ambulance fee at 100,000. The tax levy she mentioned, code fee 70,000. Town fire contract is scheduled to go up 50,000. Town ambulance contract is staying about the same, up 1,000. Rental of real property down 20,000. That has to do with the parking garage being demolished. There's no more trailways in the parking garage, which was a general fund structure, so that rental income went to the general fund. Now, when there's the transit hub, that'll be a transit or enterprise fund structure, so that rental income will go to the transit fund. We also had some miscellaneous fire department fees are down. That does not include the new false alarm fees, which are under the category of code enforcement fees. Parks and recreation fees up about 2,000, state mortgage tax down about 10,000 based on Jenny's analysis of trends. And then interfund transfers about 31,000 up.
Yeah,
Yeah. Those on?
Thank you, Greg. The interfund transfers, I want everyone to know that that's a one-time shot. This will be the last time we'll have any excess bond proceeds to apply towards our debt payments. So that is a quick summary of the general fund. So Greg, do you want to take it back?
Sure. Thanks, Jenny. So continuing along on this first page, general fund summary. Use of restricted reserves. So part of our strategy in reducing the requests down to meet the draft A budget, that $1.8 million fund balance use and all those different revenues we just listed off, is the use of restricted reserves. So we have a list here that shows the current balances of certain restricted reserves. It's not every reserve we have, but it's the ones that were most likely to be used in this budget. And then the column to the right, draft A, shows how much we're proposing to use from those reserves in the 2025 draft budget. So we're showing a total of $750,000 coming out of those various restricted reserves. Next, we're good. There was also a number of transfers to capital projects. So these we asked department heads not to include these initial requests. We did our evaluation of the requests and brought things down, and then we added these in as capital projects. You'll see these on the capital plan that we'll share with you probably the next meeting, over the next 2 meetings, we'll do that. For the two that are included in the general fund budget right now are the communications upgrade. This is, mainly looking at public safety communications, but really is looking at citywide communications. There's been some study of that. Some upgrades are needed at the public safety building primarily. And we've got a roughly $150,000 budget for that estimated. Also, this public safety building needs assessment. We don't have a report yet. We should soon. An initial very cursory overview of the building structurally, mainly. And one of the recommendations from that is to proceed with the needs assessment. And actually, this body, a previous version of this body had discussed it a few years ago and actually had approved using 50,000 from the public safety reserve for a needs assessment. What do we mean by a needs assessment? It's not just looking at the physical structure, what sort of HVAC upgrades or electrical, maybe cabling upgrades, communications infrastructure, but we know that police and fire both expressed that they are tight space, and it's difficult to operate in the building the way it was designed. And the court is there as well. So we're really looking at what are the needs of the different users, the police, the fire, and court, and determining if there's a better way to utilize that structure or a different structure or combinations thereof, what needs to be done over the next, coming up with a master plan for that building in particular. So we don't take any steps that are redone or undone in the future. So that's something we're going to recommend we go forward with. We have an estimated budget of 50,000 to do that. We'll talk some more about some other capital projects. So things that are CHIPS or state touring route funded through DOT are not shown on this budget because those are funded from a different source. So there are street projects. We're looking at possibly an East Street project, possibly more on River Street, still working on that with Chris. Again, that'll be part of that capital project discussion, but this doesn't mean that we're not going to do any street projects next year. We just won't be funding any from the general fund as it stands right now. And there's some other projects that we need to talk about as well. Up to the right, we've got 3 police officers that were requested, additional 3 in the budget. Those had to be removed in order to come down to the draft A balanced budget. Obviously, we've had a discussion with Chief Witzenberg to explain the need. This would be bringing the total police officers back up to the level they were at about 10 years ago when those at that time were vacancies and they were eliminated. And we can talk more, and I would encourage the council to engage with any department heads here tonight, or we'll have them all here for the next meetings. Whatever level of engagement, questions, discussion you want to have about the services they provide, what their needs are. even getting down to the nitty gritty, we can look at a line item and say, why do you need that? Or what is this? I encourage as much of that as you'd like to engage. Moving along, the last table is just a list of equipment replacements that were included in the requests, and then what's been either removed or still included in the draft. I'm not gonna read every one right now. Total in the draft is $521,000 of equipment placements. Most of these, as you'll see when you look through the detail a bit more, are proposed to be coming out of our reserves. The Highway Equipment Reserve, the Public Safety Reserve. There's also Water Equipment and Sewer Equipment Reserve, not shown on this page. That's a different fund. So are there any questions on that general summary? First,
So-
Sure.
The request, so the police evidence rooms like split, right, the 20 requests. So this is included in what they're wanting in draft A. They're saying this is something they have to have and included it in their draft.
Right, so in that case, the police evidence room mini split, the first one listed, the request was for $20,000. It was essentially included in draft A coming from the general fund budget. And what's in the request, I'm sorry, and what's included in draft A, same $20,000, same project, but it's coming out of a reserve fund. That one, I think in particular, is coming out of the buildings reserve. So it is included in the budget with the caveat that it's coming out of our reserves.
Gotcha, so just to take that further, the V plow for the loader, that was fully cut,
Right, that was something we said, well, let's push that off
okay.
till a future date to be determined. Same with anything that's blank.
Like to,
Yes, Mike.
so Chris, the salt shed roof, it's 80,000. It can't make it another year. And take that,
There's a recall on the salt shed covering. And that price is a 25% discount.
so we have to take it.
We have to replace it. I don't know how much time it has, we kept it, but they're telling me, I mean, there's a recall, so when a recall's called out, we have to address it.
Sure. For safety, yeah. Okay.
If you'd be interested in looking at a more detailed review of, well, that granted, a roof isn't on our equipment schedule, but vehicular equipment, larger equipment in particular, anything from police cars, fire trucks, DPW trucks. We can go through that in a lot more detail if you'd like at some point, but the reason, I mean, obviously these things were identified, they've reached their expected useful life, they're rotting out from rust or whatever the case may be. But we can talk in more detail about those decisions if you.
No, I mean, I think that's why we have, that's from my expectation. I was just asking that question because I was looking at the fact that Chris was also requesting a 10-wheel dump truck, and the 1/3 of it is 85, so. I just wanted to see the explanation or hear the explanation of why you're choosing the roof over the 1/3.
Got that. though.
Because
So-
once we get behind on our apparatus, it's very difficult, as the gentleman to your right would acknowledge.
We have a long list of backlog of vehicles.
We did
Been a
go
lot
through.
pushed off over the years.
Yeah, we went through an exercise with each of the department heads and Charlie, our fleet manager, just reviewing every piece of equipment we have that's larger than a lawnmower. And just determining what is it used for? Is there redundancy? You know, where is it in its expected useful life? What's its priority? Is it critical to what we're providing as far as services? Do we actually need this, or is this as helpful and maybe we don't need it? For the most part, things were needs, not extras. We did identify a few things that maybe we could, in theory, make do with something else if we had to. So I think that's something that we'll continue to kind of review that. Especially as we go forward with this discussion, we talk about draft B, if we're talking about changes to services, and that might inform some equipment we have that maybe we don't have anymore if we're no longer doing certain things. But
If I may continue, the V plow for the loader that we have is what we use for like plowing Main Street. The existing plow is late 1970s, 1980s, early 1980s. Still works. But you know. Priorities, it's, you know, there's a lot of juggling, we'll say.
And I guess the last question I had is, for our IT. So draft A, there's no increase. Are we spending 107?
No, sorry.
That's
Is
a
that the
reserve.
reserve account?
Over here on the left in the middle.
That's a reserve account,
So,
right? So,
that's our current balance. We're not just.
so we're not
spending any-
tapping into the reserve, but we are increasing our spend on IT, correct?
It's
that's-
relatively consistent, I believe, based on what we've spent previous years. We go through item by item to determine what needs to be replaced, or if it needs to be replaced, does it need to be replaced with a new item? Or can a hand-me-down for something that's being replaced be utilized?
I just don't have any more favors I can call in. Up and running, so.
We'd established that IT fund, I'm not sure what year, 2 years ago, anticipating a public safety building re-cabling. But we're not going forward with that until we do this needs assessment and make sure we're spending money widely.
All right, so we'll move on.
May I jump in for a minute, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
Thank you. I just wanted to stress to the council that increasing the general fund other revenue sources by over 700,000 in 1 year is an extraordinary accomplishment. Unfortunately, the expenses far exceeded that number, compounded with last year's. So I just want to emphasize the situation as far as the availability of being able to increase our other revenue sources by that amount of money in a 1 year period. That's remarkable. And I also want to reiterate what Greg said. We've done a lot of work going through to try to get that 1.8 million down to zero. And it's going to take a lot of very difficult conversations, because to do it, that, as Greg said, that means we'll be cutting staff and we'll be cutting services drastically. So that's not a conversation for tonight, but I just wanted to emphasize that that's going to be a very difficult conversation. And that's why we did not want to present it to you tonight, because of the impact. And as Greg said, it's not mine or his or the department head's decisions, but it's the council's decisions to tell us what services to cut.
Jenny, I agree with you on everything that you just said, but it's that exercise from the department head's point of view that, as a council member, I was looking forward to hearing, because it is very difficult. I'm not qualified to say to Chris or to say to Brian or any other department head what they need and what they want. There's a difference. And the zero says what you need. Going above that is what you want. And so that's why I was looking at that exercise as important. Because I'm not being naive, Jenny, and understanding for the last couple of years, if we go to zero, it would be staff layoffs.
Yes, you're correct. And
So,
yeah, and I think I can speak for all department heads. What is in the budget in front of you, I don't think there's any wants there. I think it's all the needs to provide the current level of services that we have.
Right. Draft A really is reflective of needs, and then it's a case that wants really aren't a part of this. And then it's a case of what draft B looks like, and those are going to be decisions in terms of what you wind up looking at, taking a scalpel or an axe to, for the benefit of the council being able to kind of suss all of that out in a draft B.
I'm already hearing that there are some things that we were told are needs, like increasing, the positions for police officers,
Right.
and that's not included either.
That's not even.
So I think that really, that's the message that I'm gathering from this, is that we're looking, for places where, we could trim the fat, but there's nothing left to trim, and we're already dealing with the staffing that is, stressed and, working to the max and trying to do as much as possible with, the resources that they have.
It's a pretty good assessment.
Greg, but
wanna
what does that look
continue?
like, Maureen? Meaning
What's
from what does that look like? So from each department, what does that look like? So when the department head comes back to the council and says, okay, if I cannot have part of that 1.8, I need to cut 4 positions or whatever that number is because of this. And this is what you will not get to the general public, because as representatives, that's who we have to go talk to, is the general public, to explain why. If we're going to move anywhere north of the tax cap, that's the reason why.
And I don't know yet, you know, that's why we're having this conversation.
Right, and that's why it was important for me to have that exercise of the department heads to move forward on that, so then we would know what that looks like.
We really can't make
Yeah.
an informed decision until we have both. The two things that we asked for, and we've only gotten one.
No, I think what I'm hearing though is that they've told us that they need this much, you know, to get by.
$20 million
That's what I'm
budget, there's
hearing.
always things that people, you know, they say they need it, but life will go on without it too.
So
All I'm saying is we have to look-
Say, you have said this repeatedly, and I think that's an insult to the department heads. I
I
really
don't
do.
think so, that's
I
not.
think it is. I think. it's-
Okay, guys,
Life will go on.
let's take it down, please.
I just think you need to question yourself on that. Because it's an insult to people who work here every day.
Just take it. Okay, Greg, you want to pick it up from here, please?
Sure. Moving on with the legal size sheets, still general fund summary. Now, I won't go through every line on this unless of course you want to tonight. I think this is something worth studying. I have next time, but I'll just kind of guide you through how we wrote it. What's that?
Looks fine.
It's fun. Okay, so just left to right, the columns, we've got the account numbers. You don't have to memorize those, but if you want to use those to refer to the detail budget, which is where the colored tabs are in the back of the binder. That's where it lists every request from department head and then how it might was or was not changed in the draft. So you'll see everything that was put into our budgeting software and how it was changed if it was. And that's, we always provide that. Obviously, you know, it's not expected that you have to read and understand everything that the city is doing. Obviously, that's what we do. But we're happy to discuss any of those items with you and you know, explain, justify, you know, feel free, ask as many questions as you want. That's what we're here for. The account description, obviously, you're gonna see repeats there. It's just generally, this is personal services, this is materials and supplies, et cetera. And we can provide and will provide summaries of, you know, all the general fund and personal services codes total this amount, 409 codes total this amount. Sometimes that's informative. Next column, obviously, we showed original 2024 budget, what was adopted this year. Then we show the next three columns are the request stage for 2025. We show the amount that was requested for each of these lines. The delta there, that's the change from 24 to 25. So it's the first line, 64,000, 0%. You know, where there's no percentage was shown, that's because it's, you know, divided by 0 or something like that. Notes, that first notes column under the request stage is indicating, you know, any of those deltas that was more than 10% or more in either direction. I went through and just looked at the detail so that you didn't necessarily have to go evaluate every page of the detail. We gave, okay, what is the major driver of that 14% increase to retirement? Granted, 14% on $1,400 is a $200 increase. That's very small, but it is above 10%. So I said it's because New York State retirement increases, and that's what drove that. You see that, you know, a couple lines down, judicial personal services, that's the city prosecutor. So that contract, we used to have essentially an employee or a contract employee. And now we're contracted with the county to provide those services. So those, you know, the line items we're using have changed around. Rather than paying $56,000 per year to an individual, we're paying $100,000 per year to, and that's an estimated cost for 2025 to the county of Otsego for their DA to provide, or assistant DA to provide prosecutor services as well as administrative support.
John explained why the increase of $44,000.
So that is not an increase from the county contract. The 56 was
We budgeted before.
Don Schwartz was our last prosecutor, and the way we did that. The 100,000, that was based on the contract we entered with the county. It was for 10 months this year, it was $81,000. Essentially, we're paying the actual costs of the county's assistant DA and a portion of it, and the entire cost of the administrative assistant is helping with this. I forget the percentages right now of the assistant DA, what we're paying, but it's a percentage base. So their health insurance, their salary, FICA, all of that. It's essentially, we're paying a portion of an employee's month.
Okay, so how much of a portion of it do?
I'd have to look that up again. I forget.
I'm just asking this question because that is not the agreement that I remember when we were talking to John about this. I just
We can bring that, back.
Yeah, it just seems.
Yeah, we can bring that
high.
back. It's not, I was
No,
involved
I
in that
meant
conversation too.
something changed on John's part that I'm thinking, I want to know. I know we struggled to try and find an attorney within the city of Oneonta. That's what we were struggling to do.
Correct.
Yeah. But it just, that's a jump from 56 to 100, in basically 1 year.
So that's an action item. We'll bring that back next.
Yeah, I'll make a note of that. I mean, I can't say, you know, we'll bring it back. We can bring the contract and look at it, but it's based on a formula, essentially, whatever that employee's costs are. And he sent me what they've paid so far this year from March until now. I just did the math.
I understand they get quite a bit of money.
Okay.
It's an increase.
Yes.
Substantial increase.
So again, so we'll bring that back so we can look at it.
Okay, so am I safe to assume we don't want to go through every single one of these right now? It's just, I think we understand how it works generally. I mean, we can come back to this. If you have any questions right now, feel free, but.
And that's kind of like the expectation I think that we have for this overview is that we are providing essentially a guideline to give you enough information for you to be able to do the homework over the course of these next week, so that as we get it, and then you'll email Greg about anything that you have questions about that you want to have us more fully flesh out.
Yeah.
Right.
The only other thing on this first set, if you go to page 4, you see where there's some green highlights. So draft A, that's those 3 columns on the far right, that's indicating the amount that is in draft A. Most of those amounts equal what's under request stage. Anything that's highlighted green is change. The delta there, so the first one, 48,000, the delta 5%, that's as compared to 2024 budget. Just like the other percentages, and then the notes next to that indicates what was changed to get that from 58,400 down to 48,000. Obviously, you can see more detail in the back of the binder. Moving along, we can skip to the water funds summary. I don't know, Ginny, you're there. Do you have anything you wanted to jump in with? But let's keep going.
Ginny, you there?
Yeah, sorry, I had myself muted. Yeah, with the water fund, we, a couple of things there. We, estimated a 10% rate increase for the table with a $10 increase for the minimum. And, you will see that the water fund is becoming stronger as we go on with our slow and steady approach, just like the auditor had, just mentioned in his report. We did and I'll just jump, we did the same thing with the sewer estimate. And you will see that we did lose a major customer when Stericycle closed down their boiler. That did affect the revenues for the water fund. But we have been able to not only cover a water main replacement budget for Lawn Avenue at $100,000, but by doing the estimated increase and the Lawn Avenue repair, we only had to allocate $39,000 from the water fund balance. We are hoping that as more housing units become populated, such as Springbrook, and if we extend our customer service to the baseball parks out in the West End, and as we build our customer base, that will even make the water fund stronger. But until we get those customers in place, we have to base our estimates based on the customers that we have currently. Do you have any questions regarding that?
Glenn does.
Ginny, you mentioned a month or two ago about getting to a point in the future, is it 26, 27, or 28, where we have basically a tap fee and then a price per gallon? I know we're working with the company to do a presentation. Is that something we can expect in January or February?
Yes, we have been working with Waterworth. We have set up the foundation to start doing the different scenarios. Unfortunately, just due to workload versus available staff, I haven't been able to get to it, Len, but it is close to our goals within the next couple of months to get that done and presented to council in early 25.
that a goal we can set maybe for the end of the first quarter of 25?
For the presentation, yes. Now, I want the council to keep in mind, to change how the water and sewer bills are billed will take a change to the code, which Carrie can explain in better detail than myself. But the code will have to be changed to implement it. And then, then accordingly, the billing structure and the appeal structure and things like that.
Thank you.
We've no further questions, Jenny.
Thank you.
Okay, so just moving along on this sheet, very similar, same setup as general fund. Restricted reserves, there is only one restricted reserve in the water fund, as a water equipment reserve, current balance of 457,000, and we're showing use of 54,000 and change for draft A. No new positions proposed in the water fund. Transfers to capital projects, Lawn Ave water main is shown there at $100,000, and the various equipment replacements. Anywhere you see like DPW water garage unit heater 1/3, that's just indicating it's split 3 ways between. Typically, it's going to be water, general water and sewer. Down at the bottom, DPW 1-ton utility truck 1/2, that's split between water and sewer. And same thing with the summary, a little bit more detailed summary. Same setup.
Every small one, everything.
So then the sewer fund is, I would say, the best out of the 3 this year, as far as our ability to balance that with limited use of, or in this case, you know, we had 73,000 used from fund balance in the sewer fund. But we didn't have to make a number of cuts. We didn't have to use a ton from or really we were showing no use of the sewer equipment reserve. So again, you know, looking at our history the last several years, increasing water and sewer rates, I think this is really starting to take the effect that we would like to see, which is we're getting to a point where we're able to do some capital projects. We're showing Union and Spruce sewer main in here. We haven't done a sewer main capital projects in quite some time. We've been focused on the plant. But this would be nice to get a problem area corrected. One of the priorities for DPW. Anything you wanted to add on the sewer fund, Jenny?
No, thank you. It's growing nicely, and I'm very pleased with the progress in the fund balance strength.
Skipping ahead to the enterprise fund, that's OPT. It's a lot less on this initial page. We don't have the reserves and all of that to talk about. It's really just looking at our total revenue. Jenny, can you just talk a bit about the CARES funding?
Yes, as the council knows, or maybe some of you don't know, but during COVID, the city was awarded over 1.1 million in CARES funding to help support the transit system. We did not have to use any of that CARES funding until 2023. We used about 243,000. We will be using some of that again in 2024. And then I believe the balance will be used up in the 2025 budget. Now, the transit operation system is going to have a lot of discussions about after 2025, but before, I should say, we have to have those discussions before 2025 comes to an end. And the reason being is because the 2025 budget, you're going to see that we're depending on about $500,000 or $600,000 from the CARES funding. We need to replace about 500,000 of that, either with reduced expenditures or increased revenues. We have been exploring different ideas for increased revenues, such as intermunicipal agreements with the county and or increased ridership. We've been also exploring ways of getting the expenses down. And so that conversation will continue throughout 2025.
Thank you, Jen.
And the last fund we provided a summary for was the internal service fund. We did have a request for an additional automotive mechanic in the 2025 budget that was removed to get down to draft A. There's 1 truck slated for replacement in Central Garage. does everyone understand how Central Garage works generally? It's something that, I mean, Ginny, maybe just give a brief overview for everyone here.
Sure, thank you, Greg. Central Garage supports all of the vehicle maintenance and all the small equipment, anything that has a motor. Central Garage will maintain on behalf of all the different city departments. What happens to the Central Garage budget is that has to be funded by all the other funds throughout the city, general, water, sewer, OPT. So we come up with an average hourly rate for any of the labor hours that the mechanics spend on maintaining the piece of equipment or vehicle. Then we do, and I usually look at a 3-year average of how many hours are spent according to the work orders. I also look at a 3-year average for the amount of parts that are spent and also the amount of sublet. Sublet is when the services are done by another company because either it is specialized and our mechanics are not able to take care of it, or it could be that it was warranty work that needed to go out back to the manufacturer. So what we do is then we allocate those Central Garage estimates throughout every department throughout the city. Now, I'm not sure, Greg, I apologize if you said this. Charlie had requested a 6th mechanic in his budget, which we had to take out because when we calculated the cost of what was being allocated throughout the other departments, it just was not manageable. So that request for the 6th mechanic came out. Are there any questions on how the Central Garage gets funded?
30,000 goes to home return.
Shannon, did you have a question? We're good, Jen, thank you.
Okay.
So the last thing I would just have everyone look at, you probably already have taken a peek at the detailed sheets. Just, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. You will see on the left, up top, the first sheet, it says Fund A. So when you see A, that's general. The description there is just to the right of it. And then it's going to go through, it's going to list every code that you've seen on the summary sheets, but it's also going to list every line item that was included with the descriptions from the department heads. Looking over, as you go to the right, there is 2021 actual total expenditures for each of those codes. They're not going to show it by line item because those change from year to year. It's going to show the total for that code. So the first one, this isn't in that's example, but it shows the total there. You go over, you get 2022 actual, 23 actual, original 24 budget, 2025 requests, and 2025 preliminary, which is what I'm calling draft budget. So you'll see if there's a difference between the two. You can see what that is again on the sheets we went over first. That notes column should kind of guide you to where to check things out. So you don't have to examine every line to see where differences are. You should be able to see the percentage differences and see like, oh, there's a big percentage difference here. It says it's due to retirement. Let's go take a look at that, or however you want to do it. But hopefully you don't have to look through every single line on your own. That can kind of guide you. But feel free. And as the mayor said, I believe if you look through this, if you have questions you want us to address or specific things you want us to look more into, like the prosecutor or whatever, email us ahead of time. We'll make sure we have something to share at the meeting. And then I guess the last part of the discussion is, coming back to the draft B, do we want to look at every item in this? When I say item, I mean, each code, and say, okay, how could we reduce this more? What might that look like? And what services are affected? That's kind of how we're going about it today, going through it. We're just looking at everything. We're not prioritizing or saying we as staff think this service is more important than another. We think all the services are important. That's why we're asked to provide them. To reduce them further is a discussion we can have about everything, or if there are certain areas that you say, stay away from that, or we definitely want to look at this, we could focus on that. I guess absent any additional direction, then we'll look at everything and we'll have a discussion about just about everything we can think of, how it would be affected if we were trying to find cost savings.
So what I would suggest
And
is
also revenue. It's not just cost savings. If there's an opportunity, let's add a fee here or change how we do this. We've talked about brush and yard waste pickup collection. That's something we're looking at. How we might add a user fee as opposed to adding.
Yeah. So what I would suggest is we spent a bit of time working on the strategic plan. And that exercise should really inform, especially when you're talking about the plan B options. In looking at the strategic plan, there's a prioritization that happened, that occurred, over the course of our couple of weeks worth of conversations, and each council member can look at that strategic plan and kind of have that inform some of the things that they feel might be more priority, less of a priority relative to a plan B. And so that might very well inform some of the things that you're directing to Greg and Ginny and myself over the course of next week. And certainly will form the conversations that we have on the 22nd and then on the 29th, but more specifically, probably on the 22nd. So understanding that the city, we've agreed that the city needs to do or wants to do, or should try to do certain things. Each of those priorities are going to be different for every one of you council members, but that will probably and appropriately inform some of the questions or even suggestions that we have about how we might be able to either reduce or redirect. Does that make sense?
So can't you, I guess, as our city administrator, take that document and quantify it towards the budget? I mean, isn't that the whole purpose?
So what I'd like to present, the way I'd like to present it is kind of a menu. So here is, if we do this, whatever this action is, reducing this, what services reduced? What are the cost savings associated with that? Who are we laying off? Or if it has to do with a layoff of a person, or if it has to do with we're not gonna have this equipment, or whatever this expense may be. How are we realizing savings, and what is the impact the services the city provides? There's a menu option, just like an appetizer. And then we're gonna have a number of those. And really, we'll have discussion about what is the council open to? What do you want to do or not do? What do we take off the table? What do we put on the table? Family style. And we'll figure out what that totals. What we're not gonna do is come back and propose, here is a completed draft budget that goes to zero, because we might have, if you look at everything, which is I guess what we're doing, it'll probably be more than enough to cut. When we could
get rid of everything.
We could dissolve the city and become part of the town. I don't think that's something we're talking about here.
We're not.
It's a joke. But you could reduce any service that we provide right now. What is necessary, that is really up to the people of City of Oneonta, which y'all represent, and so we'll work together to figure out what that is.
And there may be things that we have deemed in the course of those conversations around strategic planning that are a priority, that are maybe only partially addressed within the context of this budget. And so it may be that, we're taking from one and even considering adding to another, because that's where we feel the priorities should be as we look forward to what the future of Oneonta might be. Go ahead.
Well, so that is my question is, first, where is the strategic plan in any of our conversations here in terms of an actual document that we can look at to kind of help guide us in our analysis? Particularly if we get getting into weeds and details and nuance. So I'm just wondering where is it in this conversation that we're having?
And then do you feel that the staff can take a look at that document and then go back to the budget to quantify it?
Do I feel?
Yeah, because I thought that was the whole purpose. It's not a feeling.
I'd like to.
I can
I'd like to
readdress.
see it as an analysis.
I'll readdress.
Right.
That document was done. We labored through that exercise to do this.
That.
Thank you. And so that's why I'm asking Greg to use that document as our city administrator to create the budget.
But that would still be very subjective. In looking at a prioritization of what do we have, 7 unique fields and then multiples within that for you to, and I think it's also reasonable to understand what we have in terms of staff here and the hours that might be invested in something that is maybe more appropriately a conversation that happens within the context of council in our next meeting.
So I would like to put forward that we use strategic plan.
Yes.
Not the staff,
Couldn't agree more.
but that's what I would like to put forward. That it's for our purposes.
So we all have a copy of that, correct? Everybody's got the strategic plan.
I'm not sure that we have a final formatted version.
Do we have something that we can share with all council over the course of the week? So
Yeah.
So we will have something that you can work with.
Not to add to.
No, but that's a requirement, because we did go through that exercise for a reason. And it is to inform this kind of decision. So we'll do that. Greg, it's back to you. Do we feel like we have, well, Greg is, and Ginny, we're fairly well done with presentation of that kind of 30,000-foot view of things tonight? Anything that you'd want to add, Ginny?
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing that I want to add is that there are some schedules that I had hoped to have ready for you tonight, but obviously due to the various challenges, I didn't get them completed. But I will be completing them by the end of the week, and I will get them to you and also printed. I also want to just take give a shout out to my staff, John Janetz and Stephanie Decker, and also Marianne Barraro. They were very helpful in getting the binders together today for you. So I just want to publicly thank them for all of their effort of getting those done, working with me remotely and organizing them. It was greatly appreciated. And then I will get the other schedules to you electronically. Also some more narratives. Normally I give you a narrative to summarize everything that you have in front of you. I have it about half done. I will get it completed so that way you can have it, and it'll also be printed copies so you can insert it right into your binders. And I just want to thank you for your patience and understanding of the different challenges I've been facing in past recent days.
And Ginny, on the other side of that narrative, are you going to give yourself a little bit of rest?
I'm doing well. I'm very lucky. It's a very mild case, but it does slow me down just a little.
I think we all appreciate the fact that you plowed through. So thank you very much. So if there's, yes, Don, go
Judy,
ahead.
I would like to say that, you know, I think we all appreciate the work you've done, and health is the most important thing. Don't overdo it.
Thank you, Don. Right, so with that, we'll move on. Then I think we're good here. We'll move on to additional business and anything for council consideration. Have we anything? Len, was that your hand?
Is there somebody else?
Okay. No one. So it's back to you, Len.
Okay. So we are all cordially invited to the grand opening November 12th of this year at 8:30 a.m. to the Otsego County DMV Satellite Services grand opening. It's on the lower level at 242 Main Street. So November 12th at 8:30 a.m. Jen Bassell has been working very, very hard all year on putting this together. Some of the services that she actually put that in. Hold on, sorry.
Yes, we're good.
There's a bucket load of services that she has worked on. They are going to be able to do the dealer drop off, the renewed standard license, the duplicate license, identification card, vehicle registration, renewal and duplicate, your registration invitations, your titles, your duplicate titles, civil penalties, suspension and termination fee, abstract driving record, eye test. So all the things that we used to have pretty much we have back again. There was one nuance that the state did not say yes to, and I forgot what it was. I apologize. I know there was one thing New York State said new.
But that's just a great bit of news to have the DMV back. I think everybody's excited to have that in. And DSS is also, as I understand, reopening a sort of a satellite office in, that's correct? Yeah, and that's also very good. It's all same building, the county annex, basically, the county office building.
Part-time position to
So,
start off.
yeah, so these are all really positive things. Yes, Don.
Lynn, could you repeat the time?
November 12th, 8:30 a.m.
Thank you.
All right, and if there's nothing else for council consideration or any additional business, and we've already determined there's no need for an executive session, call this adjourned. Thank you.